The government is set to name Islamist and far-right groups that undermine democracy. That's all as Number 10 releases a new definition of extremism.
Yes, extremist groups that fall below the terrorism threshold but continue to promote violence, hatred or intolerance will be banned from working within any public body.
Well, it follows months of anti-Semitic commentary by groups after the 7th of October attacks, but crucially, it's going to have no effect on existing criminal law.
Well, let's get the thoughts of political commentator Andy Williams. Really good to see you this morning, Andy. What do you make of the government's new extremism definition? Is it helpful?
Well, firstly, I think it's a reaction to accusations that the government's been too slow to respond to all of the protests and the controversy that's erupted on the streets, in particular on the streets of London, in the wake of everything that happened on October the 7th. And I'm not surprised, by the way, to see that the person within government who's kind of grabbed the ball by the horns is Michael Gove, because if anyone is going to act within government, it does tend to be him. I think this is going to be really controversial, and the reason for that is that all of these things are very difficult to pin down. So we're talking about a definition that looks at organisations who promote violent and hateful ideologies. Well, how do you determine what that looks like, and where do you draw the line? So it's going to be a very subjective judgment. It's going to give the Secretary of State not statutory powers, but the power to determine who is and who is not on these lists. And these
Isn't it pretty clear, though, if someone's promoting hate? Everyone puts, everyone's got a website, everyone's got, leaflets that they dish out at these events and all the rest of it.
Well, at the extreme end, of course, it's very, very, very clear, and there should be action taken, and those organisations ultimately should be banned, and there's already processes in place to prescribe and to ban organisations who are out promoting hate and shouting hateful things and doing hateful things on the streets. But this is about categorising a group of organisations and people who promote extreme ideologies and want to overturn and replace UK democracy. And I think it's already proved controversial with 3 Home Secretaries have criticised it, the Archbishop of Canterbury has criticised it, and the question is, where do you draw the line on this? And that's what's going to be tricky.
Do you think this will help with policing of the pro-Palestine marches, which we know have been highly criticised over the past few weeks and months? Or do you think this adds another layer to policing, where police force have to interpret the law rather than enforce it?
I think it makes it more tricky for them. It adds another layer of complexity, as you sort of alluded to there. And I think the police have a hard enough job as it is, that they've not got everything right. They are, in some cases, going too far and arresting people who are making, statements that you or I might not like, but which could be deemed to be offensive, but are a factor of freedom of speech. And that's where this is the challenge. It's all about balancing civil liberties, the right to protest, the right to freedom of speech, with the first duty of any government, which is to protect its citizens.
But it's all about getting access to government, isn't it? It's about access to ministers, and it's saying, well, these groups can't have access to ministers. I mean, that seems fair enough.
It does, but...
and to be fair, some anti-extremist groups have come out and welcomed this already.
Absolutely, and in general, again, it does seem fair enough. The challenge is that if government ministers are deciding who should not have access to government ministers, there's clearly a bit of a conflict there. So I think overall, I think this is welcome, but there are obviously challenges around the nuances and the complexities of how you assign and define these organisations.
On an entirely different matter, inheritance tax, this is causing a bit of a kerfuffle today, and you wonder if the Labour parties are going to jump on this. I don't see the problem. Excuse me, the Prime Minister's family, it's claimed, are going to still benefit from a loophole that means Akshata Murthy, the Prime Minister's wife, will not pay inheritance tax despite a government crackdown on non-dom status. Now, you can see the headlines on that sound terrible, especially when you're exceedingly rich and you're going to inherit a vast amount of money. But this is about... this is about stuff she will inherit from her family in India.
Yeah.
So she'll probably still pay inheritance tax in India. This is about stopping double taxation.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading this on the way in this morning. The first thing I should say is my partner is a tax lawyer who works on double tax treaties. So I think you've kind of got the wrong person on to talk about this in my household, because that's her entire job. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, double tax treaties exist with most major countries to prevent people paying tax twice, basically. And taxation, in most cases, particularly in the UK, is decided broadly on the basis of where you live, on your residence, where you're domiciled, versus somewhere like the US, where if you're a US citizen, you can be taxed on your income anywhere in the world in the US. So she's done nothing wrong. It might be called a loophole, but it is a loophole that exists for everybody. The problem, I think, for Rishi Sunak is that 78% of people think he is out of touch with ordinary people. And that's no fault of his own. You know, he has a very wealthy wife, and that's not a problem. But it does reinforce that perception that he's out of touch.
It is the optics with this story, isn't it? And it only reinforces that narrative.
Yeah, and especially when, you know, inheritance tax is something we all know. I think I'm right in saying it's the most unpopular tax in Britain. People absolutely hate inheritance tax, but only 3% of people pay it. You know, very few people meet the threshold at which you pay inheritance tax, but people think it's unfair in general. And so, again, it's not going to be something that makes the Prime Minister look good after a difficult week for him.
Yeah. It's not so she won't be paying inheritance tax on that money.
I mean,
it'll be paid in India.
The truth is...
You think so?
Yeah.
In the scheme of things, they're so wealthy, it doesn't matter.
No.
I mean, it just doesn't matter.
But is this what we're heading to in this sort of febrile election atmosphere now? That anything, even if there's no real basis to it, is all going to make headlines, it's all going to make a fuss.
Yeah, and it's a bit depressing, I think, in some ways. I mean, if I was advising Labour, and there are probably good reasons why I'm not, I would say steer clear of this one, because actually history shows that banging on about X politician or Y politician being wealthy, people don't respond that well to it. What people care more about is their character. So if Rishi Sunak's looking out of touch, it's not because he's got a load of money in the bank, it's because of the way he behaves and the way he talks about certain things, and he hasn't helped himself again this week with the Diane Abbott row.